But for me, I was like so emotionally invested that it like hurt a little bit too much. Hello, beautiful friends and fellow word lovers. Welcome back to Pocket of Poetry. My name is Olivia, and today I'm going to be talking about the books I read in February. Started out the month of February with some very high hopes for my TBR. I was really excited about the books I was going to read because it's the month of love. I wanted to read some romance, but I also wanted to read some more thought-provoking and serious stuff as well. So I tried to kind of get a good balance in there. I ended up reading a total of 5 books, which I'm pretty happy with that number, at least. But overall, my reading experiences this month kind of disappointed me. I'm not gonna lie. I was excited going into it, and by the end of the month I kind of got myself into a little bit of a slump with reading. I'm hoping to change that in the coming month, obviously, but I'm just gonna start talking about the books I read. I'm gonna try and go through it as quickly as I can. I don't want to go into too much detail on each one of these books, but I will explain kind of as I go why the books were disappointing to me. And it's not necessarily because the books weren't good books or books that I would recommend, but I will be talking more about that as I go. So I'm just going to hop right into it. So the first book that I read in February, I actually started at the end of January and finished at the beginning of February, and it was Midnight Sun by Stephenie Meyer. It's up here on my shelf. I already actually made an entire video review on this book, so I'll link it up there and you guys can watch that if you're interested, but I'm not going to go into too much detail on what I thought of that book in this video. The next book that I read in February was A Lady of Willow Grove Hall by Sarah E. Ladd. The reason that I picked this book up, I got it from my library, and the reason that I picked it up is because I wanted a Regency romance. I'm really a fan of the Regency time period. Usually modern Regency romances fall a little bit flat for me. I'm not like ones that are written in modern day. I'm not a super huge fan of them most of the time, but every once in a while there's a good one. So I figured I'd just give this one a try. The premise of it sounded good, and I was like, you know what? I just want something fluffy, something fun and easy to read. So I grabbed that one. I'll give you guys just a brief synopsis. So the novel follows Cecily Fair, who's a young woman. She's the daughter of a blacksmith. She grows up on an estate where her father is the blacksmith for the estate. And when she's 16 years old, she falls in love with the son of the estate owner, and they decide to run away together and get married. Her father ends up finding out about the plan before they can successfully do this, and in his anger, he sends her away to a boarding school and estranges her from her twin sister. This is all stuff that you find out in like the first 5 pages, so none of it's a spoiler. But basically, now Cecily has to go through the rest of her life, first of all, separated from her family, and second of all, with this shameful secret in her past that she is now trying to protect from everybody around her. So we follow Cecily as she gets this opportunity to be a lady's companion to an older woman who's in very ill health, and she gets sent to this estate to be a companion to this woman. And while she's there, she meets the estate manager. His name is Nathaniel. He's this older, handsome guy, and the two of them kind of develop this like slow romance. So the main premise of this book is around their secrets. So Cecily has this dark secret in her past. She's not a virgin. She loses her virginity to the guy that she almost ran away with and got married to, and it's not explicitly stated, but you know, back then that was like, you were ruined if you weren't a virgin. So so that's her secret. And then Nathaniel has his own secret, and the two of them kind of like learn to trust each other or whatever. The premise of it sounded cool to me. I liked it. I like the idea of, you know, two people falling in love despite things that happened in their past. But the actual execution of the book was not done super well. The characters were honestly really boring and underdeveloped, and to be honest, I didn't have the best expectations going into this. I think I already said that. So I wasn't super let down by it, but it wasn't good. Like, I wouldn't recommend it. It was just super boring. And the thing that was frustrating was that the story did have potential. And I actually liked some of the characters. Like, I liked the old woman character. I thought she was really interesting. But they just didn't do a lot with her. And same, there was this other character who was kind of like a rival who was interested in the main love interest guy. And she was supposed to be like this beautiful, cunning woman and they kept saying stuff like, oh, we don't trust her. We don't trust this woman. And nothing ended up happening with her. So it almost felt like they were setting something up to happen in a few different scenarios in the book. It felt like they were setting something interesting up, but then it never actually happened. The ending was super predictable and boring. The romance did not intrigue me at all. And I didn't really like the main character. She was supposed to be like a strong-willed character, but she also was like not. She was a crybaby. She cried all the time. She was like super weak and frail and just like, yeah, I don't know. It was like they wanted her to be a strong character, but they also wanted her to be like demure and sweet, and it didn't work for me. So yeah, I rated this book probably like a 2 out of 5 stars. I wouldn't really recommend it. It wasn't, I don't know. I mean, it was like, I guess it was a fluffy read. It was kind of a cute romance if you're looking for something like that, but I think there are better cute romances out there that you could read. Speaking of better cute romances, the next book that I read was Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert. If you've been on BookTube at all, you've probably heard of this book and you've probably heard it hyped a lot. And I will say it pretty much deserves all of the hype. It's a really, really good book. It might have been one of my favorites that I read this month. I do just want to give a little disclaimer before I continue talking about this book. It is more of an adult romance and there are more adult scenes in there. I personally skipped a few scenes in this book because I'm kind of weird like that. I don't really like reading that kind of stuff. So I personally skipped some scenes, but if you are into it, that's great. But yeah, it is definitely a steamier romance. But it was just really, really well written, and the characters are just adorable. So well developed, so well done. I loved both of the main characters. I loved their distinct voices that you got, because you got it from two POVs. You got it from Chloe and from Red, who's her love interest. The book dealt with a lot of serious topics, but it dealt with it in a very wonderful way. And I love just like, I don't know, I love the vivid descriptions. I love how distinct and clear and fun and just full of life her writing is. And something that I really wanted to shout out about this book is that Talia Hibbert doesn't have any boring or stand-in side characters. Like, something that I noticed, every single one of the side characters, no matter how small of a role they play, were vivid and dramatic and fun and interesting. There was not a single character that was boring, and I absolutely love that about her writing. I love how she develops even the smallest of details and the smallest of things and makes it really interesting and makes it really fun to read no matter. Anyway, but it was a really fun read. I definitely would recommend it. I definitely think it was done really well, and I don't regret reading it. I think it was a lot of fun. So, and definitely the best romance that I read this month, because yeah, the romance, it was adorable. It was like a very sweet, adorable romance. So before I get on to the last 2 books that I read, I want to quickly mention a book that I DNF'd. That was The Hourglass Factory by Lucy Ribchester. I mentioned this book in a reading vlog, and I also posted about it on my Instagram, so I thought that I should clarify and let you guys know that I actually ended up DNFing this. The reason it just was not, I was just not enjoying it. It was just not fun for me. Like, I wanted it to be a fun read and it just wasn't. And I'm a big believer, if you're not enjoying something, if it's not doing anything for you, there's no shame in DNFing. I really don't think that there is. And I don't know, it wasn't doing it for me. I was just starting to get really just like weighed down and just having like a gross feeling while I was reading it. Like, I did not connect to any of the characters, especially the main character, Frankie. She was just so like, I don't even know. I didn't know what her motivations were. I didn't understand why she was doing what she was doing. Like, nothing about her character was clear to me. Like, it felt like I was like reading the book through this like foggy, murky lens. Like, it's because normally when you read a book, right, you're seeing it from the perspective of a character. Expect a character to give me a very clear picture of what's happening, and not only what's happening in the story, but also what's happening inside of the character. What is their internal motivation? What is their internal struggle? What are they going through? And I just didn't get any of that with Frankie's character. She was just so like, she was doing all these things and she was trying to solve this mystery, but I just didn't really understand what her motivation was, why she was so motivated to solve this mystery. Like, yeah, I know she wanted to be a reporter, but other than that, I just did not get her motivations, and I didn't like any of the other characters. They were just all either underdeveloped or just very like weird. Like, I just not endearing. Like, they weren't likable characters. I didn't like the characters. And the book itself dealt with a lot of really I guess graphic things. Like, it was about the suffragette movement, and so there's this whole scene in like a prison cell where they're like force feeding a prisoner because they would go on hunger strikes. And so there was just like a lot of like stuff like that. And I'm not saying that like stuff like that is always bad, and I'll never read a book like that has stuff like that in it, but for me personally, it was just not doing it for me. It was just so like, it was just making me feel depressed and gross. And speaking of feeling depressed and gross, that's kind of how the rest of the books that I'm about to talk about made me feel, and that is why I was a little bit disappointed by them. It's not because the books were bad in and of themselves. The next book that I read is the only one that I still have a physical copy of because it's the only one that I bought in February, and that is 1984 by George Orwell. I also talked about this book in my reading vlog, and you guys, this book, it's a classic for a reason, obviously. It is written so well. It is such a fascinating exploration of what the world would be like if we had no freedom, if the government really truly took control of every aspect of our lives. And it goes into such detail about the philosophies behind this government, this fictional government in this book. There's actually a book that the main character Winston reads at one point that like outlines their philosophies very clearly, and I found those parts of the books to be so interesting. I loved reading about the philosophies. I loved getting more information about this like extremely controlling government and society. And obviously 1984 is meant to be a cautionary tale, right? You're supposed to read it and think, okay, how can I prevent something like this from happening in real life? How can I become a more conscious and aware citizen so that I'm not just being spoon-fed what the media is wanting me to believe, and trying to just be more conscious and overall just be more critical of the things that we're consuming and the things that we're allowing to have happen to us in our societies. And so for that reason, obviously this book is a classic. Obviously this book is one that I would recommend everybody read at some point in their life. But I do just want to say, be cautious about the point in your life that you are reading it at, because it's pretty depressing. And I will say that for the first like 3/4 of this book, probably, it reads kind of like a fun adventure story with, it's definitely has more of a depressing element to it, and it's definitely darker and heavier, but it does read a little bit like an adventure story. There's that suspense, there's that thrill of like, oh, will they get caught, will they get found out? Like you're invested in the characters, you get invested in this world, you feel that fear that they're feeling of like, oh my gosh, like if we get caught we're gonna die, like death is inevitable. Like, so there's just there's a lot of that suspense, and it's a really fun read like that for the first 3/4 of the book. The last quarter of the book is extremely depressing. I'm not gonna give any spoilers, but I do just want to warn you, the last fourth of the book is very dark, very heavy, very depressing, and will probably leave you feeling crappy after you finish reading it, because I know it did for me. So I just want to put that out there. Be cautious, be kind to yourself, be aware of your mental state when reading this book. But yeah, it's definitely a really, really good book to read, and it's just a really educational experience to read. I feel like you learn so much when you read this, and your mind kind of gets blown in so many different ways. So yeah, those are my thoughts on 1984. I don't really want to give it a star rating just because it's such a classic, and I feel like obviously my enjoyment of the book doesn't really dictate whether or not it's a worthy book to read, and I still think it's a worthy book. I don't regret reading it at all, but I will say it did leave me very, very depressed after I finished it. And then the final book that I read in February, the one that I finished February off with, was Normal People by Sally Rooney. I read this book in one day, and I read it the day after I finished this one. So I have so much that I could say about Normal People. It is such a fascinating book to me. Like I could talk about it for a very, very long time. But I just want to say that this is another book that I would be very, very cautious about reading. If you are at all triggered by mentions of abuse in relationships, physical, domestic abuse, things like that, or if you are triggered by mentions of depression and mental illness, I would probably hold off on reading this book. I wouldn't read it because it deals with these issues in a very graphic way. And the way that it talks about depression in this book is written in a way that I personally think could be very triggering to some people. And so I just want to encourage you to be very, very careful. If you are struggling with your mental health right now, I really don't think I would recommend reading this book because it left me feeling pretty not great. And I think part of the reason why is because this book truly just like got to me emotionally. It really, really did. Like I was so invested in the characters almost from the beginning. And I know not everybody is. I understand that Sally Rooney's writing style isn't for everybody. For me personally, I was so connected to the characters. I loved the characters. From the beginning, I felt their pain, I felt their anguish, I felt their connection and their love. If you don't know what Normal People is about, I should probably go into just a little bit of detail on it. So basically, the novel is just following two main characters, Connell and Marianne. It starts off when they're in high school, and then it kind of follows their relationship starting from like the end of high school and going through to their college years. In the beginning of the book, Connell is more of a popular kid at school. He's on the football team and all of this stuff, and Marianne is very socially awkward. She doesn't have any friends. She comes from a rich family, and he comes from a poor working class family. His mother actually cleans Marianne's house for a living. And that's kind of how they form this connection and start talking. They form this relationship when they're in their high school years, and then later on in college the tables kind of turn for them. So that's all I'm going to say about the synopsis. I won't give any spoilers, but basically this book is a love story. It's about two young people and how they figure out a relationship throughout all of their issues and all of their baggage and just things that they struggle with throughout their life and coming of age kind of. And it deals with a lot of different heavy topics. And anyway, I really, really was so invested in this book to the point where it made me cry. It was just me. That's the thing. I'm like, I know a lot of people were very emotionally invested in this book, but for me, I was like so emotionally invested that it like hurt a little bit too much. I don't know if I'm even like making any sense. And I just wanted to be really open and honest about it. I don't know if I would recommend it to a lot of people, but if you feel like you can handle it and if you want a good love story, it's definitely written in a very like matter of fact. She has a very stark writing style. But I love the way she writes. I love the details she puts into her writing. I love the way she develops her characters. Like, I honestly thought the book was really well written. So, as far as like the book itself, I feel like I would give it like a 3.5 out of 5. Maybe, yeah, like a 3.5, I would say. Because it was really good. There were a few things about it that were a little bit annoying. Like, the characters were a little bit pretentious at some points, and I wasn't a huge fan of that. But for the most part, I thought it was really good. Really well done. But yeah, so that's my wrap up for February. That's all the books I read this month. I do just want to give a quick note about my March TBR. In March, I'm hoping to read a lot of happier books because, like I said, February, I read a lot of books that made me pretty sad. So I actually purchased a few books. They're up on my shelf right now, and I just want to show you guys because I'm really excited about them. I got The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, and I'm so excited to read this one. I've seen it so hyped on BookTube for a long time now, and the premise of it really intrigues me. I know it's more like a young adult. I've never read V.E. Schwab before, so I'm really excited to read my first V.E. Schwab, and I might do a reading vlog about this book. I was going to do a reading vlog about Six of Crows. That's the other one that I got. I got the Six of Crows duology. I got them both. And anyway, I just barely got these books. But I'm planning on reading them. I'm planning on reading Six of Crows and Invisible Life of Addie LaRue in March. And I also want to read some more classics in March. So I'm going to be grabbing a couple of those. So I'm super excited about my TBR. I'm hoping that the books that I read will be a little bit more uplifting, but also educational and like, thought-provoking, but also not super depressing. So that is my plan for March. I'm actually quite excited about the books I have planned for this upcoming month, and about the videos I have planned for you guys. So if you watched the video this far, thank you so much for being here. If you liked the video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe if you feel like it. But I will see you